My haunted chair. This story starts about 7 years ago. We just moved into a new house that needed so much work. When one of the walls were taken down, there was the most unusual and beautifully crafted chair back. At first, I thought it was a frame to a mirror. As the weeks passed, we came across a boarded up storage space. We removed the boards and found the seat to the chair and 2 legs. Now, this wasn't strange enough. The yard work started. As we dug up the weeds, we found 2 of the legs to the chair buried in plastic that was disintegrated. They were a little damaged and had wormholes in them, but still in good condition. So now we have a whole chair. My son and I put the chair together, and as soon as it was complete, we both said the same thing: "This chair is haunted." We dismantled it as quickly as we put it together, put it in a big trash bag, and put it in the garage for years. I thought about the beautiful chair all the time, and when I moved, I wanted to put the chair back together, so I did. I felt for some reason I was the guardian of it. I told everyone who came over never to sit in it, but one night my husband, who mocked my warnings, sat in the chair. It was immediately that his eyes had a blank look, almost as if he was in a trance. That same night, he was admitted to the hospital for months. He didn't know what year it was and what he did for a living. It was very scary, and the doctors couldn't diagnose the problem. I knew right away it was this chair. I had the chair dated, and it was from the late 1400s. It beautifully carved with a woman's face. One day, I watched the History Channel, and on the episode of Dracula Castle, there it was, the exact same chair. So, this is my strange and very true story. I still have the chair, but it's safe and sound, sitting happily in my guest room, with no chance of anyone ever sitting on it again. Oh, one more thing. Sometimes, just sometimes, when you photograph it, there's an eerie mist. This has happened a few times when guests have taken pictures of it. Well, that's it. The empty rocking chair. My best friend was expecting her first child in 4 months. One evening, she invited me over for dinner, and I hadn't seen her new place yet, so I went. It was a cute little 2-bedroom, and the baby furniture she had picked was a collection of antiques from all over. The dark cherry wood was polished to a high sheen, and she was very proud of her choices. The antique rocker was a gift from her mother. Her mother had found it at an estate sale. The person who owned the rocker had passed away a year earlier, and her adult children didn't want to keep it. Robbie was a believer in things being haunted, so she happily accepted the gift. It sat in a corner of the living room. Its ornate carved surface made it the centerpiece of the room. She ran over and sat in it, explaining how she would rock her new baby and look out the big window. Her living room window was facing a beautiful canyon, and this was the perfect spot for the rocker. We were distracted by the timer that told us the meal was ready, and we went into the kitchen to prepare our plates. I think we were gone for around 10 minutes, and when we re-entered the living room, crossing the room to go to the small dining room, we noticed the rocker was in motion. We placed our plates on the small dining room table and re-entered the living room. When we got back out there, the chair wasn't rocking any longer. Thinking it might be caused by the living room window, Robbie checked it, but found it to be closed and locked tight. We stood there, trying to figure out how that big, heavy rocker could move without some type of rational explanation. We laughed it off as a coincidence, until the hair started to rise on my arms and neck. Ugh, I didn't want to freak out Robbie, but I could see a tiny elderly woman starting to appear in the chair. She smiled at me, and she leaned forward, pushing off with legs hidden beneath a long skirt. The rocking chair started to move back and forth, and Robbie said, "What the?" She knows me very well, and as soon as she looked into my eyes, she knew I was watching someone in her new chair. I opened my mouth to explain, but Robbie let out a yell and ran to the front door, hollering the whole way. She ripped open the door and ran to the front of her complex. By the time I caught up, Robbie was crying. I tried to calm her down and tell her it was just a little old lady, probably the little old lady who had enjoyed the chair in life, but she didn't want to hear it. Robbie begged me to call her mother to come get the chair. Long story short, the chair was removed, and Robbie bought a brand new rocker. We never talked about it again. Some people can't handle a harmless haunting. Am I right? Ghost in the chair and the writing on the wall. There was a time when I was growing up back in Indiana that we were remodeling part of the old house. We'd peel the wallpaper off the walls around the stairway that went up to my bedroom, and I just put a fresh layer of spackling compound to level off, and even out the old plaster in preparation for gluing cork and mirror tiles on the walls the next day. Yes, it was the 70s. In the middle of the night, I got up to go downstairs to pee. Nice to remember that even as a kid, I had to do that once in a while. There was a rocking chair in my room that had the family cat Rascal, and he liked to sleep in it at night. With my glasses off, everything was blurry, and there was just the moonlight and the streetlight through the two windows at opposite ends of the room. One window was at the top of the stairs. I thought I was seeing Rascal's fuzzy white shape in that old wooden rocker, so I leaned down to pet him on the way to the steps. But as I reached down, my hand passed through the fuzzy, furry white blob I thought was my cat, and my fingertips touched the rough material of the cushion he would have been sleeping on. There was a sudden cold tingling feeling, like an electrical charge, except it was really, really cold. It chilled my hand to above the wrist almost immediately. This is gonna sound weird, but its outermost edges gathered blue as I looked at it. My mind was still in shock from my hand passing through my cat, and I know it doesn't make sense now, but I felt like it was drawing blue out of the room, and the tingling intensified till my elbow hurt. Then, whatever it was, took off through the back of the chair moving fast, like I'd startled it. It shot across the room and moved over to the staircase, an elliptical blob of bluish-white light that never touched the floor, but rolled in the air, slightly churning as it moved. Stupid as it might sound, I chased after it. It shot over to the stairwell, then down, keeping itself above the steps and sort of leaning into the wall, until it finally passed through the wall and out of the house, somewhere just shy of the other side of the landing. I was still at the top of the stairs and looked out the window and down, trying to see if I could find it moving out of the house. I caught sight of it briefly, just a glimpse as it darted above the hedges and tomato plants in the side yard, then suddenly shot upwards out of sight. As it moved up, it seemed to peel backwards, like it was turning itself inside out just before it disappeared. When I stopped seeing it, it was about 10 feet above my head, and almost halfway across the neighbor's backyard. That thing moved fast and weird. I kept watching the sky for a few minutes to try to see if there was anything else out there, till I really had to pee. So I went down the stairs and over to the bathroom to relieve myself, then went back to bed. It was awful late in the night, and I didn't figure anyone would want to be woken up just to hear about something that was already over. So I went back to bed. When I woke up the next day and walked down the stairs, the spackling compound was dried and would have been ready for setting tile, except now it was all scratched up. But it really wasn't like claw marks or anything, which you would have expected to follow a straight path or make curving arcs, lifting the compound, if it really was the stupid cat, and I just imagined everything else in the moonlight. No, these marks were more like a series of badly drawn lightning bolts. It looked like they'd been squiggled into the compound. They were all jaggedy, in short, almost methodical bursts, like someone was writing something but forgot to use the alphabet. But the really weird thing goes like this. The spackling compound wasn't dragged, though. I don't know how to explain it, but hang in there with me for a minute. Imagine dragging your finger through some cake frosting to make the letter Z like Zorro would. And notice how the frosting is displaced outwards by the movement of your finger, Notice how the heaviest amount of frosting ends up in a little pile pushed at the end where you lifted your finger away from the cake to lick the frosting. Notice how the frosting lifted up with you to follow your finger as long as it could before separating and falling slightly back. Now, here's the really weird thing. With these markings in the walls, there was no heaviest edge or end anywhere, period. All along all those little jagged letterish shapes, the displacement was even, as if you started at the center and pushed evenly outwards to displace the mud. Even, smooth, uniform displacement everywhere. Plus, when I said these things were letterish, I mean, they were a fairly uniform height and consistent width. Pretty much like you were scribbling something down in a hurry. Believe me, my brothers and I study these markings for a very long time, twisting around to look at these things from all different angles, even holding up a mirror to look at them backwards, before we had to smear on the glue and tile them over.